Professor Emily Harlow's fingers trembled as she carefully lifted the photograph from its acid-free archival folder. After 20 years as the head curator of historical photography at Boston University's Peabody Collection, she thought she'd seen every significant daguerreotype from America's early photographic era. Yet this particular image, recently unearthed from a forgotten storage vault beneath the Massachusetts Historical Society, made her breath catch. "What do you make of it, Marcus?" she asked her graduate assistant, who leaned over her shoulder in the temperature-controlled preservation room. Marcus adjusted his glasses, his expression growing puzzled as he studied the photograph. "It's remarkable condition for 1843. That's incredibly early for American photography." He leaned closer. 9 women, sisters, according to the documentation. The sepia-toned daguerreotype showed 9 young women arranged in a formal pose outside a grand Victorian mansion. They wore identical high-necked black dresses, their hair styled similarly in tight buns. Their faces were unnaturally still, as required by the long exposure times of early photography. "The Blackwood sisters," Emily confirmed, referencing the brittle yellowed note attached to the photograph's wooden frame. "Daughters of Jeremiah Blackwood, Massachusetts textile magnate. The family estate was apparently located about 30 miles north of Boston." Marcus frowned. "I've never heard of them. Were they significant historically?" "That's what's strange," Emily said, carefully placing the photograph on the examination table. "There's almost no historical record of the family despite their apparent wealth. The note indicates this was taken in spring 1843, and that by winter of that same year, all 9 sisters had died. No cause listed." "All 9? In the same year?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "That's statistically improbable." Emily nodded. "Exactly why I'm intrigued." She reached for her digital camera. "Let's get this properly scanned and digitized. I want to examine it more closely." Later that evening, Emily sat alone in her office, the building quiet as the autumn wind rattled the windows. On her computer screen, the high-resolution scan of the daguerreotype filled the monitor. She zoomed in slowly, examining each sister's face in detail. Something about their expressions disturbed her. A tension around the eyes, a stiffness to their posture that went beyond the necessary stillness for photography of that era. As she zoomed in on the 3rd sister from the left, Emily's blood ran cold. The young woman's eyes, unlike the blank stares of the others, seemed to be looking directly at the camera with an intensity that transcended time. But it was the almost imperceptible detail at the corner of the woman's mouth that made Emily push her chair back from the desk. A small trickle of what appeared to be blood ran from the corner of her lips. Emily quickly zoomed out, her heart racing. "It's just damage to the plate," she muttered to herself. "Oxidation or a chemical imperfection." She continued examining the photograph, zooming in on the grand house behind them, Blackwood Manor, according to the notes. The mansion was impressive, even by wealthy standards of the 1840s. 3 stories of imposing architecture, with a distinctive tower on the eastern wing. As she studied the 3rd-floor windows, a chill ran down her spine. In one window, barely visible, was what appeared to be a face, gaunt, hollow-eyed, watching the sisters from above. Emily's office phone rang, shattering the silence and causing her to jump. Her hand shook as she answered it. "Professor Harlow, it's Marcus. I'm sorry to call so late, but I found something about the Blackwood family that couldn't wait." Emily pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "What is it?" "I was searching the archives and found a series of newspaper clippings from late 1843. The sisters didn't just die. They disappeared one by one over a period of 3 months. The final sister was found in December 1843, hanged in the attic of Blackwood Manor. The authorities ruled it suicide. But what, Marcus?" "The newspaper account mentions a journal found with her body. In it, she claimed to have seen each of her sisters after they'd disappeared, standing at the foot of her bed each night, their mouths dripping blood, whispering that he's coming for you next." Emily's eyes flicked back to the computer screen, to the face in the window. "Marcus, is there any mention of what happened to Blackwood Manor after 1843? That's the other strange thing," Marcus replied. "The property was abandoned and reportedly burned to the ground in 1850. But I cross-referenced the location with modern maps. There's a psychiatric hospital built on that exact spot in 1899. It's still operational today. The Blackwood Institute." Emily stared at the photograph on her screen, at the 9 pairs of eyes that seemed to be watching her through time. "I think we need to visit this hospital, Marcus." "I already looked it up," he said, his voice dropping. "They're conducting an open house for their historical wing tomorrow. It's their 125th anniversary." After hanging up, Emily found herself unable to look away from the digitized image. As the night deepened around her office, she continued to zoom in on different elements of the photograph, searching for any clue that might explain the sisters' fate. At 2:13 a.m., as exhaustion began to cloud her judgment, Emily zoomed in on the face in the third-floor window one final time. The resolution became pixelated as she pushed the digital magnification to its limits, but what she saw caused her to scream out loud in the empty building. The face in the window was smiling now, a different expression than in her earlier examination, and its eyes were unmistakably focused on her, not on the sisters in the photograph. Emily slammed her laptop closed and backed away from her desk, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just her tired mind playing tricks, a result of too many hours staring at the same image. Yet, as she gathered her things to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in that photograph, something impossible. And she couldn't ignore the voice in her head that whispered, "They're waiting for you at Blackwood." The Blackwood Institute rose from the Massachusetts countryside like a monument to Victorian institutional architecture, all red brick, narrow windows, and forbidding spires. Though renovated multiple times over its 125-year history, the hospital retained an undeniable aura of its Gothic origins. "It doesn't look much like a place of healing," Marcus commented, as they parked in the visitor lot the following afternoon. Emily nodded, comparing the building to the mansion glimpsed in the background of the daguerreotype. Certain architectural elements, particularly the East Wing with its distinctive tower, seemed to have been incorporated into the hospital's design, as if Blackwood Manor hadn't been completely destroyed after all, but partially preserved within the newer structure. According to the Historical Society, the original foundation and some walls were incorporated into the new building, Emily said, voicing her observation. Cost-saving measure, apparently. Inside, the hospital's modern reception area belied its exterior. Bright lighting, contemporary furniture, and digital information screens created an atmosphere of clinical efficiency. A cheerful volunteer at the welcome desk provided them with visitor badges and a map for the self-guided historical tour. "You're in luck," the elderly volunteer said. "We've opened areas that are normally restricted, just for the anniversary. The East Wing, third floor, has a wonderful exhibit on early psychiatric treatments, quite fascinating, if a bit macabre." Emily and Marcus exchanged glances. The East Wing, third floor, exactly where the face had appeared in the window of the photograph. The historical tour began in the hospital's museum, displaying artifacts from its 125-year history. Medical instruments, patient artwork, staff uniforms, and photographs documenting the evolution of psychiatric care. Nothing particularly sinister, until they reached a glass case containing items predating the hospital itself. "Look," Marcus whispered, pointing to a small display card. "Items excavated during the 1899 construction, believed to belong to the original Blackwood estate." The case contained tarnished silver hairbrushes, a rusted key, a charred Bible, and a small porcelain doll with one eye missing. But what drew Emily's attention was a small daguerreotype in a tarnished copper frame, a portrait of a stern-looking man with mutton-chop whiskers and cold eyes. "Jeremiah Blackwood," she read from the card. Industrialist and father to 9 daughters, all of whom tragically died in 1843. The property remained abandoned until purchased for the construction of this institution. No mention of how they died, Marcus noted quietly. As they continued through the museum, Emily felt increasingly uneasy. The air seemed heavier in this building, the lighting somehow insufficient despite the modern fixtures. She found herself checking over her shoulder repeatedly, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. When they reached the elevator to access the East Wing's 3rd floor, a security guard stepped forward. "Historical tour?" he asked, examining their badges. "I'll need to escort you up. That section is being renovated next month, so we're limiting the number of visitors." The elevator ride was silent and tense. When the doors opened to the 3rd floor, Emily immediately understood why the area was scheduled for renovation. Unlike the modernized lower floors, this wing seemed frozen in time. Peeling paint, outdated light fixtures, and the unmistakable institutional green that had been popular in mid-century asylums. This section was used for electroshock therapy until the 1970s, the guard explained as he led them down the long corridor. And before that, it housed patients considered incurable. "Some of our staff refused to come up here alone, especially after dark." He offered a small, embarrassed smile. "Old buildings breed ghost stories." The historical exhibit occupied what had once been a treatment room. Glass cases displayed archaic psychiatric tools, leucotomies for lobotomies, electroshock apparatus, restraint systems, and various calming devices that looked more like instruments of torture. "I'll be just outside," the guard said. "Take your time." Once alone, Emily and Marcus moved methodically through the exhibit, searching for any connection to the Blackwood sisters. In the farthest corner, they found it, a small display about the land's history before the hospital. "Marcus," Emily called softly, staring at a yellowed newspaper clipping. "Look at this." The clipping, dated December 18, 1843, detailed the discovery of Elizabeth Blackwood's body, the last surviving sister, hanging in the attic of the family home. The article mentioned rumors surrounding the deaths. Whispers of a family curse, of Jeremiah Blackwood's alleged experiments with the occult following his wife's death in childbirth, of strange noises and lights reported by neighbors in the months before the sisters began to disappear. "There's more here about the journal," Marcus said, reading further. "Elizabeth wrote that her sisters appeared to her covered in blood, their eyes black and empty, warning that Father has opened a door that cannot be closed. The authorities dismissed it as the ravings of a disturbed mind." Emily stepped back from the display, her mind racing. "We need to see if that journal still exists." "Excuse me," a soft voice behind them made them both jump. An elderly woman in a hospital volunteer uniform stood in the doorway. Her name tag read, "Dr. Helen Crawford, historical consultant." "I couldn't help overhearing your interest in the Blackwood family," she said, her voice gentle but her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "It's something of a specialty of mine. Perhaps I can help." Emily hesitated only briefly before explaining their discovery of the daguerreotype and their research into the sisters' mysterious deaths. Dr. Crawford listened intently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "The journal does still exist," she said finally. "It's not on public display due to its fragile condition, but as the hospital's historical consultant, I have access. Would you like to see it?" 20 minutes later, they sat in Dr. Crawford's cluttered office in the hospital's administrative wing. With gloved hands, the elderly doctor carefully opened an acid-free box and removed a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age. "Elizabeth Blackwood's final testament," Dr. Crawford said, gently opening it to reveal faded, spidery handwriting. Most historians dismissed it as the product of grief and mental instability. 9 young women dying in such a short time, typhoid or tuberculosis, seemed the logical explanation, though no medical records confirm this. Emily and Marcus leaned forward as Dr. Crawford began to read selected passages. October 3rd, 1843. Margaret has been gone 3 days. Father locks himself in the East Tower room and will speak to no one. Last night I woke to find Margaret standing at the foot of my bed, her nightgown soaked in blood. When she opened her mouth to speak, black liquid poured forth. She said only, "He's opened the door." October 17th, 1843. Catherine disappeared last night. The servants whisper of leaving. Father rages one moment and sits in eerie silence the next. I found his journal hidden beneath a floorboard in the library, pages of strange symbols and references to the 9 gates and the blood price. November 28th, 1843. I am the only one left now. They come to me every night, all 8 of my sisters, standing in a circle around my bed, their eyes like empty pits. They say Father has bound them to something hungry and ancient, something that lives in the spaces between. They say it requires 9 sacrifices to fully enter our world, and I am to be the last. They say it wears Father's face now, but it is not him. Dr. Crawford closed the journal gently. The final entry is dated December 15th, 3 days before Elizabeth was found dead. It simply says, "It is not Father anymore. I cannot escape. May God forgive us all." A heavy silence filled the office. Outside, the afternoon had faded into evening, shadows lengthening across the floor. "What happened to Jeremiah Blackwood?" Emily asked finally. Dr. Crawford's face tightened almost imperceptibly. That's where the story becomes even more disturbing. His body was never found. The authorities searched the property extensively after Elizabeth's death, but Jeremiah Blackwood had simply vanished. She carefully returned the journal to its protective box. "There's one more thing you should know. When the hospital was built in 1899, the construction workers made a disturbing discovery in what would have been beneath the mansion's East Tower. A hidden room containing an altar-like stone structure surrounded by unusual markings carved into the floor. And on the walls—" She paused. "On the walls," Marcus prompted. "Photographs exist in our archives," Dr. Crawford said, turning to her computer. "They've never been published." The black and white photographs she pulled up showed a stone-walled chamber with a central altar. But it was the walls that drew Emily's horrified gaze, covered in handprints, hundreds of them, small and delicate, like those of young women. In the final photograph, a close-up showed that the handprints appeared to have been made in blood. "The hospital was built anyway?" Emily asked incredulously. Dr. Crawford nodded. "Different times. The discovery was hushed up, the room sealed off and built over. It would have remained hidden if not for a water leak in 1963 that led to its rediscovery." She closed the images. The room was properly sealed then, concrete poured to fill it completely. As they prepared to leave, Emily remembered the daguerreotype. "Dr. Crawford, would you like to see the photograph we found? I have the high-resolution scan on my phone." The elderly woman nodded, accepting Emily's phone. As she studied the image, her professional composure faltered. May I see it larger? The 3rd sister from the left." Emily took the phone and zoomed in on the sister with the blood at the corner of her mouth. Dr. Crawford's face paled. "That's impossible," she whispered. "What is it?" Marcus asked. With trembling hands, Dr. Crawford opened a drawer in her desk and removed a faded photograph in a protective sleeve. "This is a staff photo from the hospital's opening in 1899. The woman in the center is the first medical director, Dr. Abigail Winters." Emily took the photograph, and her blood turned to ice. "Doctor, Abigail Winters was identical to the 3rd Blackwood sister. The same face, the same intense eyes, photographed 56 years apart without aging a day." "There's something else," Dr. Crawford said, her voice barely audible. "Dr. Winters disappeared in 1903 after 9 female patients died under mysterious circumstances within a 3-month period. Before the last patient died, she reported seeing the other 8 victims standing around her bed at night. The case was covered up to protect the hospital's reputation." As the implications sank in, Emily felt a creeping dread climbing her spine. "Has anything similar happened since?" Dr. Crawford's silence was answer enough. "We should go," Marcus said, suddenly checking his watch. "It's getting late." As they thanked Dr. Crawford and made their way back to the main entrance, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The hospital corridors seemed longer, the shadows deeper. The few remaining staff they passed, watching them with unnatural intensity. In the parking lot, now dark, except for scattered security lights, Marcus gripped Emily's arm. "I don't think we should continue this research," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Something feels wrong about all of this." Emily nodded, the rational part of her mind agreeing completely. Yet, as they reached her car, she found herself saying, "I need to look at that photograph one more time. The original, not just the scan. There's something we're missing." Marcus stared at her, confusion and concern warring in his expression. "Emily, it's after hours. The collection will be closed. I have the access codes," she heard herself say. "It won't take long." As they drove away from the Blackwood Institute, neither noticed the figure watching from the third-floor window of the East Wing, a figure in Victorian dress, with blood trickling from the corner of its mouth. The Peabody Collection building stood dark against the night sky as Emily swiped her security card at the service entrance. Marcus followed reluctantly, his earlier enthusiasm for their historical mystery now tempered by growing unease. "We could come back tomorrow morning," he suggested as Emily disabled the alarm system with practiced movements, "when there are other people around." "It'll just take a few minutes," Emily assured him, though she didn't entirely understand her own urgency. Something was driving her to see the original daguerreotype again, something beyond academic curiosity. The preservation room felt different at night, the temperature-controlled environment creating an unnatural stillness. Emily moved directly to the secure cabinet where she'd stored the Blackwood sisters' photograph, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "I want to examine the back of the frame," she explained, as she laid the daguerreotype on the examination table. "There might be additional information we missed." Carefully, she removed the photograph from its protective sleeve and turned it over. The wooden back of the frame was unremarkable, but as she angled it under the strong light, she noticed faint scratches, deliberate markings nearly invisible to the casual observer. "Marcus, hand me that magnifier." Under magnification, the scratches resolved into a series of small symbols etched into the wood, similar to those described in Elizabeth Blackwood's journal as appearing in her father's writings. "These look like some kind of ritual markings," Marcus said, leaning closer, "like something from a grimoire or occult text." As Emily traced the symbols with her gloved finger, a small panel in the wooden frame clicked and slid aside, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a folded slip of yellowed paper. With trembling hands, Emily extracted the paper and unfolded it on the table. The handwriting matched that in Elizabeth's journal, spidery, desperate strokes of ink on paper. "To whoever finds this, the daguerreotype is not a record but a prison. He bound their spirits to the silver plate through blood sacrifice, creating his 9 gates. Do not study their faces, do not seek their names. Above all, do not bring the 9 together again. I hide this warning where he cannot find it. God forgive me, for I have helped him unwittingly, and now I shall be the 9th. E.B." Emily and Marcus stared at the note in stunned silence, the implications washing over them like cold water. "We need to seal this back up," Marcus finally said, reaching for the photograph. But Emily couldn't take her eyes from the daguerreotype, now face up on the table. The sisters stared back at her, and in the silver surface of the image she could almost imagine movement, a flutter of eyelids, a twitch of lips. "Emily!" Marcus's voice seemed to come from far away. "Emily, don't look at it anymore." "The face in the window," she murmured, ignoring him. "It's changed again." Marcus reluctantly followed her gaze to the third-floor window of Blackwood Manor, captured in the photograph. The face was indeed different, clearer now, unmistakably that of Jeremiah Blackwood, as they had seen him in the museum display. But his eyes were wrong, entirely black and fixed directly on the viewer. A sudden chill swept through the preservation room, the temperature dropping precipitously despite the climate control systems. The overhead lights flickered, and in the momentary darkness, Emily could have sworn she saw movement within the photograph. 9 figures shifting position. When the light stabilized, Marcus gasped. "Emily, their positions okayed." The 9 sisters in the daguerreotype had changed arrangement, subtly but undeniably different from moments before. The 3rd sister, the one resembling Dr. Abigail Winters, now stood in the center of the group, her eyes looking directly out of the photograph, a slight smile on her blood-stained lips. "This is impossible," Emily whispered, backing away from the table. "Daguerreotypes are fixed images on silver plates. They can't change." A soft knock at the preservation room door made them both jump. Through the glass panel, they could see a security guard, an unfamiliar face, watching them with an unnatural stillness. "Did you call security?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. Emily shook her head, reaching for her phone. "We need to leave. Now." As she turned back to gather the photograph and notes, she froze. Standing on the other side of the examination table was a young woman in a high-necked black Victorian dress, her hair in a tight bun, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. She was translucent, like a reflection in glass, but undeniably present. The 3rd Blackwood sister stepped out of the photograph that still lay on the table. Emily opened her mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. Behind her, Marcus made a strangled noise of terror. The apparition spoke, her voice like the rustling of dry paper. "You brought us together again. The 9 gates. The Institute. The photograph. You completed the circle." The knocking at the door grew louder, more insistent. Through the glass, Emily could now see that the security guard was accompanied by 8 women in hospital scrubs, all with identical blank expressions, all with dark liquid dripping from their mouths. "What do you want?" Emily managed to choke out. The ghost's smile widened, revealing teeth stained black. "Father needs 9 more. It has been waiting so patiently. 54 years since the last 9, and now you've awakened the hunger again." With a tremendous crash, the door flew open. The 9 figures began to enter. The guard, now clearly a man whose face seemed to ripple and change, as though something else wore his features like an ill-fitting mask. Marcus grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward the emergency exit at the back of the preservation room. "Run!" They burst through the door into the fire stairwell, the alarm blaring as they took the stairs 2 at a time. Behind them, unhurried footsteps followed, steady, patient, certain. "My car!" Emily gasped as they reached the ground floor. Side parking lot. The night air hit them like a physical force as they ran across the campus. The parking lot was deserted, Emily's car sitting alone beneath a flickering lamppost. As she fumbled with her keys, Marcus suddenly went rigid beside her. "Emily," he whispered. "Look." Standing in a perfect semicircle around the far side of her car were 9 figures, the same 9 they had fled from inside, now impossibly ahead of them. The man at the center no longer bothered with his disguise. His face shifted between that of Jeremiah Blackwood and something else. Something with too many angles, eyes like bottomless wells, a mouth that opened wider than any human mouth could. "We need to separate," Marcus said urgently. "It needs 9. If we stay together, it will take us both." Emily clutched his arm. "No, we need to stay together." But Marcus was already pulling away. "Run to the main campus. There will be people in the library. Security. I'll lead them away and meet you there." Before she could protest, he sprinted away from the car, shouting to draw their attention. To Emily's horror, 3 of the figures broke away and followed him with that same unhurried, inevitable pace. With a sob, Emily ran in the opposite direction toward the lights of the main library complex. Behind her she could hear footsteps, patient, measured, drawing steadily closer despite her panicked flight. The library loomed ahead, its windows bright with light, promises of safety. Emily raced up the steps, nearly colliding with a student exiting the building. She burst through the doors into the crowded main hall, gasping for breath, looking wildly around for security. "I need help," she managed to tell the startled student worker at the information desk. "Please call campus security. There are people chasing me." The young woman nodded, reaching for the phone. "What do they look like?" "9 people," Emily began, then stopped as she saw the student's expression change, her eyes going flat, a dark trickle appearing at the corner of her mouth. Emily backed away, bumping into someone behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with another student whose features were similarly transforming, the same blank eyes, the same black liquid dripping from his lips. All around the library, people were changing, turning to stare at her with identical expressions. The Blackwood entity had somehow spread, infecting everyone in the building. Trapped and desperate, Emily did the only thing she could think of. She pulled the fire alarm. Immediately, sprinklers activated, and automated announcements began directing everyone to evacuate. In the resulting chaos, she slipped away, ducking down a service corridor and finding her way to a rear exit. Outside again, she tried calling Marcus, but her phone showed no signal. The campus, normally busy even at night, seemed unnaturally deserted. In the distance, she could see police lights responding to the fire alarm, but between her and them were scattered figures standing unnaturally still, watching, waiting. With no clear path to safety, Emily made a desperate decision. She would return to where this had started, the Blackwood Institute. If the entity was tied to the photograph, the original location and the 9 sisters, perhaps there was something in Dr. Crawford's research that could end this. 40 minutes later, after a harrowing journey by foot and a commandeered campus bicycle, Emily stood once again before the Blackwood Institute. The building was dark, except for security lighting, the parking lot empty save for a single car, Dr. Crawford's, Emily realized, with a mixture of hope and dread. Using the visitor badge from earlier that still hung around her neck, Emily gained access to the side entrance. The hospital corridors were dimly lit and deserted, the night staff mysteriously absent. She made her way to Dr. Crawford's office, praying the elderly historian was still there, that she might have answers. The office door stood ajar, a slice of light spilling into the corridor. Emily approached cautiously, calling out softly, "Dr. Crawford, it's Emily Harlow. I need your help." When no answer came, she pushed the door open wider. "Doctor." Crawford sat at her desk, her back to the door, seemingly absorbed in reading. "Dr. Crawford." Emily stepped into the office. The chair swiveled slowly around. Dr. Crawford's face was slack, her eyes black and empty, dark liquid staining her chin and the front of her blouse. "She tried to warn you," said a voice that was not Dr. Crawford's, deeper, masculine, with an antique, formal quality. "Just as she tried to warn the others, each time the 9 gates opened, but the hunger always finds a way." Emily backed toward the door, but it swung shut behind her. Dr. Crawford, or whatever now inhabited her, smiled with terrible gentleness. "You've done so well bringing it full circle. The photograph, the institute, the original site, all the elements aligned after so many years." "What are you?" Emily whispered. The thing wearing Dr. Crawford's face stood, moving with an unnatural fluidity. "I am what waits between, what hungers in the dark spaces, what Jeremiah Blackwood thought he could control with his 9 gates of flesh and blood." It gestured to the computer screen, where the archival photograph of the hidden chamber was still displayed. "He opened the door but could not close it. So many have fed me since, 9 at a time when the stars align. And now you have awakened me again." Emily's mind raced, desperately searching for anything that might save her. Elizabeth's warning echoed in her thoughts. The daguerreotype is not a record, but a prison. The photograph, she said suddenly. It binds you somehow. The 9 sisters, their spirits are trapped in it, keeping you contained. The thing paused, its black eyes narrowing. Clever girl. The silver plate, treated with their blood, holds the gate. But you've weakened the binding by bringing it here, to the place of power. And soon 9 new vessels will complete the ritual begun in 1843. A terrible realization dawned. Marcus, the others you took tonight, they're to be sacrifices. The Crawford thing smiled. The 9th is always special. The one who understands, who sees the truth before the end. Like Elizabeth, like you. As it stepped toward her, Emily's hand closed around a heavy paperweight on the nearby shelf, a chunk of polished stone from the hospital's original foundation, according to its small plaque. The binding works both ways, doesn't it? She said, an idea forming. The photograph traps the sisters, but it also traps you. Without it, you have no anchor in this world. The thing hesitated. Confirmation enough for Emily. In that moment of uncertainty, she smashed the paperweight against the computer screen, shattering it. In the shower of sparks and glass, she bolted for the door, wrenching it open and running blindly down the corridor. She had one desperate plan now: find the original site of the ritual chamber beneath the east wing. Dr. Crawford had said it was filled with concrete in 1963, but if the entity was still connected to it, there might be a way to use that connection against it. The east wing was darker than the rest of the hospital, the security lighting failing to penetrate its depths. Using her phone's flashlight, Emily made her way to the basement access stairwell, descending into the building's foundations. The basement level was a maze of utility rooms, storage areas, and maintenance tunnels. Emily moved as quietly as possible, listening for pursuers while searching for any indication of the East Tower's location relative to the basement. A faint humming led her to an electrical room where building schematics were posted on the wall. Tracing the outline with her finger, she located the east wing and its distinctive tower, and directly beneath it, a section marked "Void, Do Not Excavate." Following the schematics, Emily navigated through the basement until she stood beneath what should be the east tower. The area was unremarkable: a concrete floor, painted cement walls, storage shelves holding cleaning supplies. Nothing to indicate the horror that had once existed here. The sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor, the measured, unhurried pace she had come to dread. They had found her. With nowhere left to run, Emily turned to face the doorway as 9 figures entered, 8 in modern clothing, led by the thing wearing Dr. Crawford's face. Behind them came a 10th figure, emerging from the shadows. Marcus, his eyes now black and empty, blood trickling from his mouth. "No," Emily whispered. "Marcus." "The circle nears completion," the Crawford thing said. "Just one more vessel to fill." As they advanced toward her, Emily dropped to her knees and began scratching at the concrete floor with the metal edge of a shelf bracket she had grabbed. She had no plan now, only desperate instinct to reach the chamber below, to somehow break the connection. "It's too late for that," the entity said, almost kindly. "The chamber is sealed, the gate is opening, and you will be the 9th. Emily looked up at the thing wearing her friend's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry I brought you into this." And then she saw it. Behind the possessed figures, a new shape forming in the shadows. A young woman in Victorian dress, blood at her lips, her eyes clear and determined. Behind her, 8 more figures materialized, the Blackwood sisters appearing just as they had in the daguerreotype. The Crawford thing sensed their presence and turned, hissing, "No! You are bound!" The lead sister, the third from the left in the photograph, spoke in that same paper-dry voice. "We have been bound for too long. You used our blood to open your gate, Father. Our blood can close it." The spectral sisters moved forward, passing through the possessed figures who writhed and shrieked at their touch. As each ghost made contact with a possessed person, black liquid poured from the victim's mouth and eyes, their bodies convulsing before collapsing to the floor. The Crawford thing backed away, its face contorting with rage and fear. You cannot undo what was done. The hunger must be fed. The lead sister turned to Emily, her spectral form growing more substantial by the moment. The binding can be broken, but there is a price. The 9th gate must be closed by the 9th sacrifice, freely given. Emily understood with terrible clarity. A life for a life, mine for theirs. She nodded toward Marcus and the others, who lay unconscious but alive on the floor. The ghost nodded solemnly. You would take Elizabeth's place, completing the circle that has turned for nearly 2 centuries. The Crawford thing lunged suddenly, inhumanly fast, its hands closing around Emily's throat. Mine! The 9th is mine! Emily struggled against its grip, gasping for air as the room began to dim around her. Through darkening vision, she saw the Black Emily struggled against its grip, gasping for air as the room began to dim around her. Through darkening vision, she saw the Blackwood sisters converge on the Crawford thing, their spectral hands passing through its body like smoke through a sieve. The 9th must choose, the lead sister insisted, her voice cutting through Emily's fading consciousness. The sacrifice must be willing. With the last of her strength, Emily met the ghost's eyes and whispered, I choose. A blinding light erupted from the concrete floor beneath them, cracking the sealed chamber open as if 2 centuries of time meant nothing. The Crawford thing screamed, a sound no human throat could produce, as it was torn away from Emily and dragged toward the widening fissure. No! I will not return to the darkness, it howled, its form shifting rapidly between Dr. Crawford, Jeremiah Blackwood, and something ancient and terrible. I have waited too long. The lead sister turned to Emily, who lay gasping on the floor. The gate must be sealed with blood freely given. Are you certain of your choice? Emily looked past her to where Marcus and the others lay unconscious but alive. There's no other way to end this permanently. The hunger has grown too strong. It has fed for too long. Only a willing 9th can close what the unwilling 9th opened. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history, of lives lost across centuries. What will happen to the others? To Marcus? They will live, with no memory of this night. The possession leaves no trace when the gate is closed properly. The fissure in the floor widened further, supernatural light spilling up from depths that should not exist. The Crawford thing was being gradually pulled in, its form dissolving at the edges as it fought against the inexorable force. Emily pushed herself to her feet, swaying with exhaustion and fear. And the sisters, what happens to you? The ghost's face softened with an expression that might have been hope. Release. After nearly 2 centuries of imprisonment, we will finally be free. The decision crystallized in Emily's mind with sudden clarity. This had begun with 9 unwilling sacrifices, with a father's betrayal of his daughters. It would end with 1 willing sacrifice, freely chosen to protect others. I'm ready, she said, stepping toward the edge of the fissure. The lead sister nodded solemnly and reached out her translucent hand. As Emily took it, the ghost's touch solidified, becoming as real and warm as any living person's. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, the ghost promised. I will make certain of it. Before Emily could ask what she meant, the 8 other sisters formed a circle around them. They began to sing, a haunting melody in a language Emily didn't recognize but somehow understood. An ending, a sealing, a binding renewed. The Crawford thing thrashed at the edge of the abyss, its form continually shifting, its screams becoming more desperate. You cannot hold me forever. I will find another way, another 9 gates. Not in this world, the lead sister replied calmly. Not anymore. Emily felt a strange peace descend as the sisters' song enveloped her. The fear remained, but behind it was purpose. The knowledge that her choice would save not just Marcus and the others, but countless potential victims across time. As the song reached its crescendo, Emily stepped forward, the lead sister's hand still clasped in hers. Together, they approached the edge of the light. The Crawford thing reached for them with hands that were no longer remotely human, but the sister's circle held it at bay. One final truth, the lead sister whispered to Emily as they stood at the precipice. My name was Sarah. Remember it. With that, they stepped into the light together. Emily felt a moment of searing pain, followed by a sensation of falling. The Crawford thing's screams faded, the sister's song grew distant, and darkness closed around her. 3 days later, Marcus Bennett sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop screen with growing frustration. Something was wrong with his memory. According to his calendar, he had been working with Professor Harlow on a research project involving early American photography, but he had no recollection of what they had discovered or even what specific photographs they had been studying. His text messages showed conversations with Emily about a daguerreotype and plans to visit someplace called the Blackwood Institute. But when he tried to call her to ask about it, her phone went straight to voicemail. Emails to her university address bounced back with an automated message, "This account has been deactivated." When he had gone to her office at the university, he found it empty, not just unoccupied, but cleared out as if she had never worked there. The department secretary had given him a strange look when he asked about Professor Emily Harlow. "We don't have anyone by that name in the department," she had told him. "Never have, as far as I know." Yet Marcus had photos on his phone of himself and Emily together at academic conferences. He had emails going back years. He remembered her doctoral dissertation defense, her promotion to department chair, countless conversations about historical research. Now, sitting in front of his computer, he searched for any trace of the Blackwood sisters or the mysterious institute they had apparently visited. There was nothing. No newspaper articles about 9 sisters dying in 1843. No psychiatric hospital called the Blackwood Institute. No record of a textile magnate named Jeremiah Blackwood. Had he imagined it all? Was he having some kind of breakdown? As he scrolled through his research notes, trying to piece together the missing days, an email notification appeared in the corner of his screen. The sender was listed simply as S. With trembling fingers, Marcus opened the email. It contained no message, only an attachment, a high-resolution scan of a daguerreotype he had never seen before. It showed 8 young women in Victorian dress standing in front of a grand mansion. In the center, where a 9th sister should have stood, was a space, not empty, but subtly blurred, as if someone had been carefully removed from the image. As Marcus stared at the photograph, his eyes drawn to that blurred central space, he noticed something in the 3rd-floor window of the mansion. A face watching the sisters. A face he somehow recognized without ever having seen it before. At the bottom of the email was a single line of text. She chose. Remember her. Sarah Blackwood. Marcus closed his laptop slowly, a chill running down his spine, despite not understanding why. Outside his window, the autumn wind picked up, rustling the leaves of trees preparing for winter. For reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself whispering a name he'd never heard before. Emily. 1 year later, Dr. Marcus Bennett, recently appointed curator of the Boston University Peabody Collection, carefully removed an acid-free folder from the climate-controlled storage vault. Inside was a daguerreotype that had been anonymously donated to the collection 6 months earlier, accompanied by a handwritten note claiming it to be the only known photograph of the Blackwood sisters, a family that had apparently been prominent in Massachusetts textile manufacturing during the 1840s. The photograph showed 8 young women in formal Victorian dress, arranged in front of an impressive mansion. Historical records about the family were surprisingly sparse, but Marcus had become somewhat obsessed with uncovering their story, though he couldn't explain why the photograph held such fascination for him. As he placed the daguerreotype on the examination table, he noticed again the strange blurred area in the center where it appeared a 9th sister should have been standing. Every expert who had examined the photograph had been unable to explain the anomaly. It wasn't damage to the plate or an error in the photographic process, but rather as if someone had been deliberately removed from the image while it was being created, an impossibility for daguerreotype technology. Marcus had recently discovered a reference to the Blackwood family in the journal of a Boston physician from 1843, mentioning the tragic deaths of 9 sisters under mysterious circumstances. Yet when he searched historical newspapers from the period, he found no accounts of these deaths, no obituaries, no public records confirming their existence. It was as if someone had systematically erased the family from history, leaving only scattered, disconnected fragments. As he studied the photograph for the 100th time, Marcus focused on the mansion in the background, Blackwood Manor, according to his research. The site where it had stood was now occupied by a community mental health center built in the 1960s, with no trace of the original structure remaining. Tomorrow he would visit the location, continuing his inexplicable quest to uncover the truth about the Blackwood sisters. He didn't understand the compulsion driving him, or why he sometimes woke from dreams with a woman's name on his lips, a name he could never quite remember upon waking. Marcus carefully returned the photograph to its protective folder, unaware of the faint figure watching him from the preservation room doorway. A woman in modern clothing, her form translucent in the fluorescent light, a sad smile on her lips as she whispered, "Remember." Behind her, 8 more figures materialized briefly, young women in black Victorian dresses, their faces solemn but at peace. The lead sister placed a spectral hand on the modern woman's shoulder. "He will, Emily," Sarah Blackwood promised. "In time, he will remember." As Marcus turned toward the door, the figures vanished, leaving nothing but a momentary chill in the air and the faintest scent of silver and blood.